So my name is Eduardo Rivera. I worked at in the NetApp IT organization, and my role is I'm the manager of the storage engineering team. The reason I'm here today is we as a, and we'll go over what Customer-1 is, but as an organization, part of our charter is really to provide our internal product teams with feedback on their products, as well as to serve as a reference to customers external to NetApp. And in talking to you guys, I think what I wanted to accomplish is just gonna give you a taste for this is what our environment looks like. Here are some of the highlights of it and things that we're doing within NetApp IT, and really try to create as interactive as possible of a conversation. Obviously, we only have an hour of time. It's not enough to cover everything that we do, right? So what we're gonna cover really just a few highlight topics. In fact, I probably have more topics than what we can cover. But what I wanted to do is take some time to go through some of the, I don't know, what I think are top of mind issues or top of mind environments, and give you a view into them, and give you also an opportunity to comment, ask questions, and we can talk about it. If we spend the whole time talking about one topic, I guess that's fine. Again, I want to encourage everybody to participate and ask questions. And furthermore, as Elias was saying, any of these things that we cover and beyond, we can come back and revisit with yourself or customers or whatnot, and we can go deeper or higher level, or whatever mixture that is convenient for you guys. So with that said, I think most people are on mute. If you want to talk, please unmute yourself and interrupt me and ask any questions you may have. Again, I encourage it so we can have a good discussion. All right, so let me kind of review or show you guys what the agenda looks like. There's, as I said, too many topics here to cover in an hour, but I'll probably get through maybe 3 of these, maybe 4, depending on how fast we go. I don't intend to go too fast because I want to make sure that everybody is following through. But in essence, we'll talk to you guys a little bit about what Customer-1 is, so you understand where we come from, what we do. We'll spend some time talking about our ONTAP environment, again, from a high level view, so you see where we are and some of the things that we're thinking about these days. We'll talk about StorageGRID, which has been very popular over the past year or so. We can talk about our platform. When I say PaaS, it's platform as a service, or I as infrastructure as a service, and what we're doing with those environments related to storage. And then beyond that, I don't think we're gonna have time to cover the other ones, but we can talk about how we do OCI and how we also done storage service catalog, using some methodologies and some practices within NetApp IT. Now, all that said, there's a lot more things that we can cover in future discussions, and I encourage any feedback or any comments you guys may have. All right, let's get into it. So let's talk about Customer-1. So who are we, right? So we call ourselves Customer-1 within NetApp IT because we are essentially the team that is implementing our NetApp technology, and therefore we become kind of the experts of this technology and the first customer to consume it more often than not, right? So when new products are created or new products are released to market, we're often also try to consume it or buy it or deploy it as soon as possible to make it part of our infrastructure. That also plays into the role of like, how do we match those products with existing needs, right? So we don't try to deploy just for deployment's sakes. We try to deploy to match some sort of need that we may have with the infrastructure. So we become this first customer, and again, we're consuming it the same way the external customer would, all through the purchasing of the product, the unpackaging, deployment, and the support model along with it. And that's one of our biggest, one of our biggest charters, right? On the other hand, right, we also are I'll say, storage service design organization for IT. We are the engineering team that is starting to figure out, what are we going to deploy, how are we going to deploy it, what needs we need to satisfy, and all the architecture and engineering goes behind that. Because we participate in that role, we also become sort of consultants to the other teams that work with us. And by other teams, I mean the application teams, the other perhaps compute, networking, other environments that may have a stake on what we're doing within the storage infrastructure. We've solved issues day to day with IT infrastructure. We, as I mentioned before, we use the opportunity that we have of deploying these products early to contribute back to the product teams. And in fact, we have actually many meetings scheduled with different product teams where we try to cover maybe things that we didn't like or we do like, or things that we would like to see on different products, or just general feedback of implementation and how things are working. So we have that constant communication with those developers and those, I'll say, leaders on the product organizations to try to, keep them abreast of what, the real world looks like, right, for their products. And ultimately, right, we are like probably most of your customers out there that you deal with, especially, big enterprise customers. We are the storage team, right? So we are the team that is managing the IT storage infrastructure. They're responsible for it to be up and running, and that with that goes operational support and documentation and as I said earlier, architecture. The only difference between ourselves and probably your external customers is that, or maybe not, is that we consume everything NetApp, right? So we don't go shopping around for other technologies, because obviously what we consume is NetApp storage technology. All right. With that said, I want to show you guys this slide, and this is sort of like an internal slide for us, how we have organized within my team. And keep in mind, the team is about six people wide. We cater to a whole bunch of different technologies. It's not only storage, but it's also technologies that are related or say integrated with storage. So we kind of have to become, I'll say, experts, so subject matter experts of all these things that you see on the screen. And we organize different, I'll say, different collection of these bullet points that you see into different people's portfolios. So the way that our team is organized is that we have, let's say, a person who's in charge of, our ONTAP infrastructure in general. Another one that may be in charge of OCI. Another one that's in charge of, let's say, StorageGRID environment. So we start to group all these technologies into portfolios. We give them, themes, as you see at the top, right? And then on the far right-hand side, it's more not necessarily about product, it's more about strategies, right? Like that we're doing with within the team, like developing code, like establishing collaboration relationships, thinking about security in general, and more specifically at the end, there you see like things like Ansible storage automation. That the product should be more generic automation. But the reason I share this is because as a team, we attack our portfolio by organizing it and giving people ownership, almost like, I'll say, like product managers within the team, to try to provide the expertise and all the support that's needed. When you look at corporate IT at NetApp, right, and these statistics, they change every day, depending on how things are going. You get a real glance of what of the scope of it, right? We're a traditional enterprise organization in all ways, right? We have a wide amount of employees across a whole bunch of different offices, and from a systems perspective, right? We support, as it says in here, right? Almost 100 petabytes. That's 73 petabytes usable, by the way. A whole bunch of controllers, servers, hypervisors, and all that stuff exists to support our applications. From a storage infrastructure point of view, we really kind of cover the gamut, right? We have our traditional sort of data center setups, right, where we have your enterprise EVI or EDW Oracle applications that we have to support from a storage point of view. We have our private cloud environments that are more dynamic and are more, I'll say, with the times and modern looking. We also cater to things like our NetApp private storage, which is a piece of ONTAP hardware sitting on an Equinix cage next to the AWS and Azure. And ultimately, we try to deliver all these things, right? Because we kind of span the gamut. We try to provide a kind of hybrid cloud delivery model, and that we'll get more into that as we go in here. But essentially, we're just trying to, as we mature, progress and blur that line between are you in the cloud or you're internal? How do we migrate applications that are traditional into more cloud-like infrastructure and so on? And as I said on the bottom of the corporate IT and NetApp slide here, we talk about Customer-1 program. And the Customer-1 program is the reason why we're talking today, right? So we try to explain what we do and try to provide some feedback to, not feedback, but really like references to customers and other external parties. We are out there in Insight, we're out there at other events, and we often host conversations like this one. All right, so when we talk about the hybrid cloud inside NetApp IT, this is obviously I'll say a marketeering slide from our perspective, right? But it gives you a view of what all we're talking about. We really have almost every technology in there, right? So we have ONTAP, StorageGRID, SolidFire, FlexSpot, everything, E-Series, and we've deployed all those in traditional data center environments, as well as we're migrating, or really, I'll say migrating is the wrong word, but it's like expanding into private cloud infrastructure that is also built on similar components, right? Like Flash Fast, HCI, and StorageGRID, and we'll talk about that. But beyond that, right, we also have to think about how we put together those components through, tools like OnCommand Insight, OCI, right, that allows us to see across the board, not only the ones that are on-prem, but also the things like NetApp Private Storage, which sits outside, and now cloud volumes, right, or cloud ONTAP that may be out there, because we do have compute and storage resources now on the hyperscalers as well. And on the other hand, we have other things that are not necessarily storage related, right, but they are, I'll say, tangentially related, like all of our SaaS services that we start consuming as a company, right? We have Office 365, ServiceNow, SAP, and others. And those services, although they don't really, touch our storage directly today, they're starting to, right? So, for example, on the Office 365 side, on SAP side, right, you might have heard of, I think it was called Cloud Control at one point, and I think now it's another backup service where we can backup data from a SaaS provider onto on-prem. And those are things that are starting to, I'll say, appear and mature, and certainly being integrated into the bigger picture that we're trying to drive. All right. With all that said, any questions on what Customer-1 is, our charter, what we're trying to do? And if not, we'll
Eduardo, just one question from me. It's Elias here. How many systems do we have more or less internally? Is that something you can tell us? Or
I have a slide on that. Yeah, so I'll go back a slide here. In terms of storage controllers, and by a controller I mean every controller either was ONTAP, E-Series, SolidFire, etc. That collectively we have 447 controllers as of today, right? These are dispersed across many different sites, and from our storage capacity is 73 petabytes usable. Raw is like 110 or 120 or something like that. So it's so that's like the high level view. I'll have a different slide though that are coming up where we talk about ONTAP, and I have some numbers for ONTAP to give you a better perspective.
Thank you.
All right. If no other questions, please feel free to interrupt. I'll just move on to the next topic. So let's talk a little bit about ONTAP, right? ONTAP has been, as you're probably all well aware, right, the long-running product for NetApp. Now we have a complete portfolio of products nowadays, but ONTAP really has been there since day one, right? And as a result, it really is the bulk of our infrastructure. Now, as I said a second ago, here's a glimpse of the numbers, right? So when we talk about ONTAP, it really supports the vast majority of our environment. Do we have clusters spread across multiple physical locations? From a data center perspective, we really have, like, I'll say, 2 big data centers, one in Raleigh, North Carolina, in our RTP side, and one in Hillsboro, Oregon, which is our, I'll say, that we call the production site. But aside from those 2 big data centers, there's many remote locations like Hong Kong, Sydney, Amsterdam, Wichita, among others. So we have the global problems of any enterprise customer with all this infrastructure distributed. We have collectively today 36 clustered, 172 ONTAP nodes, tons of SDNs, tons of volumes, and from a usable capacity, if I was looking at 73 earlier as a whole, 45 petabytes of that 73 is an ONTAP. And on the other hand, on the other picture that I have here, the reason I placed this information here is I wanted to show you our distribution, right? That today, right, you can see that we actually have a pretty wide distribution of system types. And why is that important? Well, it's important because it gives us the experience, right? We really have a lot of knowledge across all these systems, and you can see some of these are actually pretty old. We're getting ready to get rid of them. But the other thing that you'll see is that we have I would say a pretty healthy deployment of all flash fast. And if I were to show these maybe I don't know, a year ago even, that 29% of flash fast it probably was more like 5%, right? So over the last year, we have significantly grown our all flash fast infrastructure as we retire old systems and bring in the systems in. And I'll have some more stuff to say about that in a future slide. But at a glance, this is what it looks like today for us. Now, we also consume, and this is kind of goes back to, I think, starts getting into the customer kind of benefits of having us be part of a customer program. We actually consume ONTAP releases pretty early on. We deploy pre-release candidates in our lab and our early adopter environment, and then we roll them up into what we call our backup infrastructure, sub-production, and production on a staggered manner once they reach our C release. Why is this important? Well, it's because the reason why we do this early consumption, we do it hand in hand with the ONTAP release team to identify and find bugs early on in the life cycle. And we actually have identified quite a few, and some of them have been bugs that have stopped ONTAP shipment before they can fix it and come back to it. So basically, our involvement in this has really increased the quality of ONTAP releases, because we tested in also real world scenarios where we can provide this feedback directly to the product team, and they can fix it and move on. Now, with that said, and I don't know how your customers do it, excluding the part about the pre-release deployments, we're in a constant cycle of upgrades, and I think knowing some customers may be more shy to upgrade on an ongoing basis for maybe change control reasons or some other concerns, but we are on a roll forward kind of mentality. We're continuously upgrading. We basically have an entire program, managed by a program manager, collectively with some of the engineers on my team, where we are constantly identifying and upgrading clusters to the latest and greatest as soon as new software is available. And that gives us two things, right? It allows us to really be on the edge of the new technology, right? To take advantage of all the new tools and features. And it also allows us to deploy the newer and latest hardware, right? Because the newest hardware always requires newer versions, and we're always striving to have it up and running at the latest version. As an example, I kind of want to give you a feel for it. All of our clusters are in different, I'll say, tracks, right? And then we are always upgrading to the latest and greatest. You can see most of our infrastructure is running at 9.5, and then the really early ones are 9.6, which is yet to be released, right? So that's where we're doing all that initial testing. All right, well, all that said, let's talk a little bit about strategy with regards to ONTAP and all flash fast, which I mentioned earlier. I think this may be relevant to your customers. So what is our strategy, right? I don't know about what you have seen on the street or what you've seen with the people that you work with, but at least for us, we're no longer buying the 10K RPM SAS drives internally. That has been the case for the last year, if not more. Basically, our strategy moving forward, it's either an all flash fast or an NL SAS based system. And for the NL SAS based systems, we've been really heavily using flash pools. And if you remember, I think it was a 9.3 or 9.1 where flash pool and flash cache now kind of work together. So when we deploy new systems, they all have flash cache, they all have flash pool, and that's how we provide the I'll say the the low tier and the mid tier sort of performance capacity. But outside of that, it's all flash fast. The reason is, you'll see in a second, is that the density of these new drives on the nearline SAS and the SSDs, it just far outpaces anything we can get with 10 RPM drives nowadays. And it just makes much more economical sense. It also has helped, the introduction of all flash has also helped us with kind of rethinking the way we approach aggregate construction. Why is this important? Is because when you're buying new filers and new shelves, and in the traditional matter where it's all mechanical, there was a lot of math to be done, right? Like, oh, okay, so how big is the aggregate? Is it too small? Can I buy half a shelf? Can I buy all these questions that a sales storage engineer may ask about how to optimize their performance and capacity at the same time. All flash fast makes that easier by taking away the question of performance, right? So I can build a pretty small aggregate that performs, that outperforms the controller itself, right? We can buy shelves on half increments. We can build aggregates that are much more efficient when we have the drives by creating big large RAID groups, and it just removes another the element of, I'll say, uncertainty from the performance side, at least on the disk subsystem, right? So it gives us the flexibility to deploy small nodes, right? In the past, you probably have a tendency, or maybe your customers might have a tendency to deploy a controller and like 30 shelves attached to it, right, to maximize performance. That's no longer a practice we're following. We're actually capping the number of shelves per controller to make sure that we have the adequate amount of performance, and with the drives of 15 terabyte drives and 30 terabyte drives nowadays, the capacity is there even within a shelf, right? So that allows us to deliver a lot of capacity and a lot of performance in a much more smaller form factor. And the other thing that happens that we've noticed, right, in our environment is, like, we used to worry a lot about this subsystems, right, performance, like this to utilize, so they're in balance, that we have to reallocate. That's no longer the case. Now, really, the problem is either the controller, because we put too much workloads behind it, and we didn't think about it, or the network, right? But the network is probably the first thing, the bottlenecks nowadays, right? Now we're throwing 40 gig, even 100 gig on the on the A800, if you have one of those. But in the more traditional, 10 gig connections, those become the bottleneck nowadays, because the disk is no longer slow. The other thing that happens is with our flash fast is this. We have a ridiculous amount of consolidation that we can do in our data centers. There's no longer, not only is it fast and dense, but it's also recovering footprint. Oops, this transition by itself. It's also recovering footprint of the data center, and it's also giving us back power and space, right? So it is quite significant, and this is one example of probably 3 or 4 different consolidations that we're doing as we speak. So we're going to end up with a much more leaner, faster, and efficient data center just because of the introduction of all flash fast. The other thing, and this is sort of like a point in time kind of view, but I want to give you an idea of the other results that we're seeing as we introduce all flash fast in our environment. This is a real world, ERP, Oracle database, taken at a point in time, and I was trying to compare the previous environment, the yellow one that you said that says ONTAP fast, to the new all flash fast. And while you can see, if you look at the numbers carefully, while you can see that the yellow one is not terrible, right? It's still good. There was a lot of variability in the response time, the latency, right? As you look at the green line, you can see how much more consistent it is in low. And you can see here on the numbers themselves, right? Like when you look at the numbers, it's what we expect. It's average is like 0.14 millisecond, right? When it spikes out, it spikes to 0.6. That's pretty darn fast, right? On the same time, the same observed time period, you'll see that even though it's a lot lower, the throughput is a lot higher as well. So which is what we will expect. This is just kind of like confirmation that, yeah, this is the effect that it's having. And of course, it's just one workload. We see this across the board with all the infrastructure moving into it. Any questions so far on all flash fast or implementation or strategies?
Hi, Eduardo, it's Elias here. Any chance you can put the lines on mute again. I think there's 1 or 2 lines are not muted, and we can hear some background noise.
Let me see. Oh, somebody here. Let's see. All right, should be better now, I think.
Thank you.
Okay.
And now they can't answer they can't ask questions.
No, they can unmute themselves, right? So if you want to speak, please unmute yourself. You should be able to do so.
Hey, Eduardo, it's Mary Jo. There was a question asking, are we using Harvest to monitor the systems?
We are actually, among other things. So let's talk about monitoring for a second here. We are actually using, and I apologize, I wasn't looking at the chat because I was presenting, so I can bring it up and look at it in a second. We are using Harvest, we are using OCI, we are using OCOM, which also brings OPM. And I think the question you probably ask is, well, what do you do with each one of those things? Different things, right? Harvest, I like Harvest because it gives you every single statistic that you can get out of these filers, right? It gives you all sorts of like graphs and really detailed information about, nuanced little items, right? Like volumes or NFS operations per type. So we use it to collect all information, and for us to have that I guess information bucket as a reference, like let's look at what happened. But what it doesn't do for us, it doesn't really alert, right? Like we're not issuing alerts from Harvest. We're not using tickets from Harvest. It's merely a tool for the storage engineer to go back and look at things whenever we feel like we want to look at something. On the other hand, right, OCOM or OnCommand Unified Manager is our ticket generator, for lack of a better word, right? So OCOM is the one that is actually monitoring all the filers and sending us tickets via SNMP, SNMP alerts about things being down, maybe failures on drives, failures on network interfaces, et cetera, et cetera. And then OCI, we use really for a couple of things. OCI is there for performance troubleshooting, right? So like while Harvest can tell you what's going on with the filer, it has no idea how to correlate that to, let's say, a server or a VM or something that's having an issue. OCI knows that, right? So through OCI, we can go and determine, hey, that particular VM or data store or whatnot is having an issue. I see a difference in latency, and that seems to be related to this other component over there. And it gives you quickly I guess a root cause, or I guess a superficial root cause to try to figure out, okay, let's look at that component now. So that's what OCI brings to the table. At the same time, OCI also brings the report generation that we use quite a bit for lifecycle management and capacity management. And I actually have some examples of that down the PowerPoint if you guys want to look at it. But yeah, so long story short, we do use Harvest, but we use it for what it's strong at, which is show me statistics. As long as I know which one I want to look at, I can find it. Hopefully that answers the question. I apologize. I trying to look at the chat at the same time. It's a little hard. All right. Let's see. Where are we? Let's move to the next slide here. So finally, on our ONTAP stuff, I want to talk a little bit about our data protection, right? So, and this is not a new story, right? This is probably bread and butter for ONTAP with all your customers today. But I think it does take some discipline, and it really takes some understanding of what you want to accomplish within data protection to set the right policies and set the right expectations with the users. In our case, what we've been doing is that we essentially have a default snapshot policy, which is described right here at the beginning, right? The default snapshot policy is essentially applied to every volume, right? The cost of snapping is null, right? It doesn't really affect anything. It doesn't cost anything. It's essentially free, and because of that, we snap on a pretty regular basis, right? We're creating snapshots, as you see, 5 hourly, 6 daily, 5 weekly, 3 monthly. You could argue that maybe it's a little overkill, but it just has worked out. It's worked for us, and having that protection within the volume to be able to quickly recover from any user issue or perhaps some data corruption that happened on the database, something like that, is invaluable, right? Just having this there, this is really kind of the first line of defense and the most often used line of defense with regards to data loss. So we do that as a default. And then beyond that, we have some DR, or disaster recovery situations. Not everything is set up that way, but the ones that are using SnapMirror, as you would imagine, and it's a little bit driven by the application needs. But in general terms, right? If there's an application OS, we'll just do an update of that SnapMirror relation every day, every 24 hours. If it's a database, maybe every 4 hours. You combine that with the recovery logs, like the redo, the archive logs for Oracle and things like that, and you can bring up your database up to date. So DR is something that is a specific on a need for need basis, or need by need basis, I guess. On the other hand, we also have what we call, let's say, short-term archives, right? And for short-term archives now, SnapVault. Now, I'll admit, between SnapMirror and SnapVault, the lines are becoming blurry, because I don't think we make the differentiation anymore from the ONTAP side. It's really more about setting the right replication policy, right? Is it a TP or XTP, or is it a, you know, for update all? I forget all the different variations.
Is someone saying something? It's not audible at all.
Oh, can you guys hear me? Can anybody else hear me?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So it sounds like somebody was having issues listening or hearing, sorry. Anyways, if you guys hear a long pause in my presentation, then let me know, because I should probably be speaking the whole time. All right. Hopefully that will resolve itself. Anyway, so when it comes down to short-term archives, right, like we are using SnapVault, or the SnapVault like policy to create some viable retentions based on the need. Beyond that, we actually have some long-term archive needs, and these are more for compliance reasons. In our case, in the US, we had to comply with SOX compliance, and that dictates we either have to have a 3 to 7 year retention depending on the data. And to address those, we actually are using a combination of SnapVault and SnapLock to create the copy and lock the snapshot for the amount of time that it needs to be. And then after that, we'll just get rid of it. Now, as we are doing all this stuff with snapshots and SnapMirrors and SnapVaults, we're also rolling out Snap Center. And I hope that your customers are well aware of this. If they are Snap Manager users, Snap Center is sort of the replacement for that as we go forward. And Snap Center is going to be managed a little bit different in the sense that what we're trying to do is give the application teams access to Snap Center for them to control their own backups, control their own replication policies within reasons, right? So we'll work with them to establish the right relationships between SVM and SVM, and then they will have to manage their, Snap Center essentially will talk to their database servers, to their application servers to create, I guess, a cohesive backup, right, for those services. So we're working on deploying Snap Center, namely to back up all of our SQL Server environments, Oracle environments, and also now with VMware. If you remember VMware VSC, or the VSC plugin, which is the one that allows you to do snapshots and recovery through vCenter, the new VSC plugin integrates with Snap Center and actually, in fact, requires it for it to work. So we're working on deploying that and rolling that functionality out. All right, so we talked a little bit about ONTAP, and I just want to pause here. Any questions, any comments, anything that you guys want to, further deep down? All right, if nothing, I'll just continue down the road. As I said earlier at the beginning of the presentation, I think we're only going to cover a few topics because of time, but we can certainly pick it back up and do more in a future session. So let's talk a little bit about StorageGRID. I'm not sure what adoption you guys are seeing in StorageGRID in EMEA, but I think StorageGRID, at least for us, has been exploding. There is a lot of interest on StorageGRID internally to NetApp IT, and I see it also with customers that I talk to externally. So much so that this is a graph that kind of represents our growth over the last year or so. Really, yeah, a year and a half growth of StorageGRID capacity. It has we continually feed our grid. Now I'll show you what that grid looks like in a second. Oops, this wants to continue going forward. why StorageGRID is important to us? Well, it's a great resource for unstructured data. It's a great resource for things like archives, Docker images, backups. I apologize, it's slight. But it's also a great for application aware, or sorry, cloud aware applications that are more likely to be doing things like stateless storage calls, right? They just put or just get information. And within our environment, our StorageGRID usage has really continue to grow in terms of tenants, right? We really kind of started StorageGRID as a means for us to do data archiving, namely for SOX data archiving. We were using frankly, an outable solution to send stuff to StorageGRID, and that's how it started its life. But since then, many other solutions come up, right? Like the Active IQ team is now saving all their Hadoop data that has been generated from their Hadoop cluster. They're archiving it into StorageGRID. We also have become the repository for all the Docker images that are being created as a result of our OpenShift and platform as a service implementation within NetApp IT. StorageGRID is also the engine behind the newly released ActiveIQ secure file upload functionality. So when you upload core files to NetApp, they actually end up in a StorageGRID infrastructure behind the scenes. It's also a repository for our GitLab backups. As our GitLab is our code repository for our team. And as I said earlier, next-gen cloud-native application data. So what I mean by that is that if you are a new, I guess anyone who's creating new applications nowadays that they're going to, let's say, AWS or any of the hypervisors, their assumption is that they're not necessarily mounting a file system, right? Their assumption is that I'll just push some objects into, S3 or whatever the variant of that object storage solution may be. And as we're becoming, as I said earlier, more of a hybrid cloud provider, a lot of those applications and the interest of providing cloud-aware applications internally then increases the need to have this native object storage solution within our data centers. Now, what does it look like for us? It looks like this, right? So we have more than one grid, but we have one big grid in our corporate storage environment. The biggest grid is what I'm representing here. And you can see that we have 3 sites that are collectively one namespace, right? So we have our HIO, which is Hillsboro, RTP, which is in Raleigh, and SVL, which is in Sunnyvale, California. So the way a StorageGRID works, if you're not familiar with it, it's not a single thing. It's a collection of appliances, a collection of nodes that create the grid. And in terms of the meat of it, the storage nodes is really what makes up the grid, right? The storage nodes, if you're familiar with the pros out there, is where we sell the the SG6060, the StorageGRID 6060 appliance, 5712, 5760, and before that 5660. So they can be this physical E-series appliance that run StorageGRID, or they could also be run as VMs. In our case, we actually have a collection of these. We have probably one of everything in terms of the physical appliances, as well as VMs in some cases. And you can see that also that it's not uniform, right? Some areas are smaller than others, so that's also okay. And the other thing to keep in mind is that we have these gateways, right? StorageGRID provides this gateway for access of clients. No matter where you access or which gateway of these ones you access, you have access to the entire collection of storage and the entire grid. And that's one of the neat things about StorageGRID is that once the data is in the grid, it gets replicated based on ILM or information lifecycle policies, and access to that data is available through any of the gateways, right? And obviously you want to probably talk to the one that's closest to you because it's more beneficial in terms of performance. At the same time, and this is kind of like a more information that you probably need, but it's we have a second grid that we have sitting out on our DMC environment, and this DMC environment is the one that is collecting all the information from the secure file upload. So while I have this grid that is internal and it's using all the all these resources and it's really kind of the big object storage environment, we have a smaller yet growing environment that is internet facing, that we're using for collecting, to really support applications that are interacting with customers and interacting with external systems that want write data as object storage. All right. We have probably 13 minutes left, and I think this is probably the last topic we're probably going to cover before we run out of time. But I want to pause once again and ask you guys any questions, any comments, or anything else you guys want to, dive into. All right, I guess everything must be crystal clear and exciting. All right, let's move on. So let's talk about a little bit about PaaS and IaaS, right? So what is PaaS? By PaaS, I mean platform as a service, and IaaS is infrastructure as a service. You probably have heard these terms before, because they're buzzwords as of the last 3 years or so. And I'll try to define them a little bit, right? So platform as a service is the ability to provide a end-to-end, I'll say, application stack that when you, as a developer or as an application user, you say, hey, I want a stack of, I want a MongoDB, stack, and you click a button and all the infrastructure behind it gets created, behind the scenes without you really seeing it. All the databases get deployed, and ultimately you get a login. Say, here you go, put your data in. That's PaaS as a service, right? You create an application from the ground up, and you eventually give the end user the platform for them to start doing their work. Infrastructure as a service is a little more of a more traditional, and that's where maybe as a user you say, hey, I need a VM, right? Not necessarily a stack, but I need a virtual machine to do some work, and I'm just going to click a button, and virtual machine gets created, and with some version of Linux or Windows or whatever it may be, and then you get access to the machine, but you don't necessarily have to go and talk to 10 different people to get the storage and get the networking and get the other thing created. You just want a virtual machine, and it gets created with all the dependencies behind the scenes. So that's sort of like the 10,000-foot view between PaaS and IaaS. Now, what is that important to us? Well, there's a change, right? And we probably have talked to customers out there that this is something that we have seen ourselves, and I think everybody else is seeing, is that as we move forward with applications, and I'm saying this from an enterprise perspective, right, where most of our applications are monolithic and big and traditional. As we move forward, the desire is to change that trend and to build more cloud-aware applications that are based on microservices, using things like containers instead of VMs, leveraging infrastructure that it's cloud-like, if not cloud, and using a development method of that is more like DevOps, right? Where it's agile. Well, agile's the wrong word. DevOps is more like a streamline and fast, and fail fast and recover fast sort of a mentality. Now, with this dynamic, what does that mean for storage, right? Obviously, if their expectation is that application infrastructure is cloud, that means that the end user, who is our customer in this case, they don't really care about the product that we're providing, right? They don't really care about the storage properties in and outs. They just want something that's easy, that is click button, and that is automated, right? So we kind of have to change the way that we provision storage for this type of infrastructure, and that's where we kind of have this principles, so to speak, right, of how we want to approach this. So we want to make sure that storage services in this paradigm are self-service, right? There's no like as I mentioned earlier, have to talk to 10 different people to get it. That the choices are based, and in our case, the choices are based on some simple dimensions or simple choices, right? I want a block file object, I want some particular size, and I want some particular performance. And in some cases, maybe some of these may be pre-chosen for our customer based on some of the choices they made for their application stack, right? Furthermore, we don't really want to have giving the end user or consumer access to the storage infrastructure because it doesn't make any sense for them, right? We just want them to request this infrastructure through some user portal or some user interface, be that I mentioned Snow or ServiceNow, which is something that we use. OpenShift, which is sort of indirect to the customer, right? That would maybe requesting it through some code, right? When they're asking for a particular stack. In the future, NK8S, right? But the whole point is that individuals are not really interacting directly to the infrastructure. They're interacting through some portal, right? And that what that means for the administrator is that it is sort of hands off, right? When we set all this up and it's up and running, as an administrator of the storage platform, I should be able to not have to deal with it, other than worry about the very basic things. Hey, is a filer connected to a network? Is the the physical things up and running? It's those aspects that you have to do operationally. But in terms of creating and destroying and manipulating storage resources, that should be automated and should be self-healing and should be part of that solution. So when we put this all together to kind of deliver private cloud infrastructure from a storage point of view, and maybe even beyond that, here's what it looks like for us, right? This is how we are building it with our own technology. So we are actually heavily deploying NetApp HCI to provide I'll say the building blocks for the virtual infrastructure that is the backbone of this, right? So it provides compute, it provides memory. You can deploy VMs, which in turn are the infrastructure components for containers, right? So that was HCI brings to the table. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we're also pushing the use of a StorageGRID because it's our internal object storage platform, and I think it goes well with the idea of cloud-aware applications trying to use stateless services just as object storage. And for I'll say high performance stateful storage, NFS, iSCSI, that kind of stuff, we are tying in an all-flash fast solution, right? For them to provide either NFS volumes, iSCSI LUNs, and it's really meant to be application storage only, right? So I'll show you another picture in a second, but these are how we're kind of putting together all of our components to deliver a private cloud infrastructure. A further view.
Is there a reason for not using the HCI storage more and having the all flash FAS in there as well?
Well, there's a couple of reasons, and I'll show you, right? The reason is because we're treating in this, and I'll show you with this picture, we're treating the HCI storage and access compute as I'll say a VMware farm generator, right? So the Solidifier cluster is providing data stores to ESX to provide all the, I'll say the root volumes for all the VMs, as well as any local, I'll say quote unquote local storage needs for those VMs. But because frankly we have the ONTAP all-flash FAS systems on the floor, these are not necessarily dedicated. These are actually systems that are also serving other workloads. But within those systems, we're creating SVMs, and I'll show you in a second how we put it all together to provide application storage. And we keep it there for a couple of reasons. I think primarily it fits our data protection scheme much better, which is what I presented earlier, where we still do the snapshots and that kind of stuff. It also, to be very honest, it actually provides more scalability, right? ONTAP really, as a storage platform, scales a lot bigger, right? I can create bigger volumes. I can create, more nodes. I can really grow this clusters quite large, not only in capacity but also performance. Now, we started this journey just kind of keeping it all within the HCI, but soon we kind of came to the conclusion, hey, we should just use our all-flash FAS because it's there, we have it, and it actually works quite well. So the compromise that we did here is that we are, and I mentioned at the top here is version 1.0. This may change in the future, but we are treating the HCI deployment as a VMware farm to provide the basic building blocks for that VMware infrastructure.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And then just to give you a little more view into it, this is how we're deploying it. Because we're not relying on the storage that much, right, other than the ESX data stores, we're really kind of densifying heavily on the compute, right? So when you look at it, and this is an example, that's not necessarily how everything looks, but this is how we're making it look, right? So we're probably gonna be heavy on the computes, minimal on the storage of anything HCI. and then grow it to, so it doesn't fit anymore on the rack, either because we ran out of ports networking wise or space or power, and then we'll just do it again, right? So that's sort of the approach we're taking with this, and so far it's been successful, right? We are, I'll say, in our not so early stages, but kind of early stages of ramping up within HCI, and it does what it promises, right? We have a pretty good VMware appliance, so to speak, right? And it fits the use case. Now, from a delivering an automation perspective, we are tying on that up with Trident, right? So I mentioned we use an OpenShift, which in the future may change to NetApp Kubernetes, but we're just not there yet. So we're using OpenShift, and we are leveraging Trident to manage the storage on the ONTAP side. So I mentioned earlier that we have an SVM that we dedicate to Trident. It may be more than one, but ultimately, here's what the hands-off part comes into play. Trident is the administrator of the volumes and the storage within ONTAP. And if you're not familiar with Trident, I'll try to explain it briefly. When you create new containers need storage. OpenShift or Kubernetes itself wants to satiate that storage need with what they call a volume claim or a physical volume claim. And all that stuff can get, I guess, sort of complicated behind the scenes, and you can do all this stuff by hand. But what Trident does, it comes into the middle there, it talks to OpenShift, it understands the requirements that it needs from a storage capacity. Then Trident goes and talks to the ONTAP SVM, creates the volumes, exports them, and mounts them in the container. Therefore, it becomes sort of the automatic storage manager. And this is how we want to operate. We don't want to have to deal with it. We want to let it do its thing. And we take a step back as a storage administrator and look at the cluster, take care of the cluster as a whole versus of the details inside that particular SVM. So when you put the Trident together with the solution I presented, a couple slides back, which is this, you can see that the manipulation of this data is automated for these applications. This is automated because it's automated through the OpenShift integration, right? OpenShift actually creating more VMs. The storage is already provided by the SolarFire cluster, and away you go. And that's how you kind of build the basics for the private cloud infrastructure. And that's how we're doing it. All right, well, we have 1 minute left before the end of the hour. I'm gonna stop right here. And I wanted to, again, open it up for questions or if any further comments that you guys may have. If not, I guess I'll remind you guys that, again, what we did today, we kind of went over an overview of a few of the technology areas that we're covering within Customer-1. We can get a lot deeper. We can bring a lot more technical folks in different particular subjects, and we can talk further about any one of these and even more topics. Sorry, as I said, I have the list of a couple other things in this slide deck that we can maybe cover at a future date.
And also, Eduardo, it's Elias here. I'm guessing if they want to send their questions via email, I can always forward them to you.
Yes, please. So
asking a second time, has anybody got any questions for Eduardo? He has covered a lot. It's a lot to take in.
I think I have a question in the chat I just saw about tape usage. I think the question is, do we have zero tape usage? The answer is yes. We used to be tape, I mean, frankly, and we still have some archived tapes somewhere that we may or may not be able to recover because they're very old. but the reality is that we moved away from tape about 2.5, maybe even 2.75 years ago. And we moved away from our tape solution to do an output to StorageGRID solution. And now we moved away from that to kind of become an ONTAP backup solution only, just because we kind of redefined what we need to back up. It's actually quite small. And what I mean by backup is long-term archiving. The tapes over there only for long-term archiving. Everything else is protected via either SnapMirror or SnapVault.
How large is the team that supports this Customer-1 environment?
So my storage team is 6 people altogether. And then we actually have an operations team that may be about, I'll say maybe 8 to 10 people. They're consider them like a level 1, level 2 kind of support. but the engineering team is 6 people. Thank you very much, Elias. I'll let you close it out.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna close the call, but you know how to reach me. You've all got my email address. If you have any further questions, or there's another question I think on the chat actually, Eduardo from. Thanks, Eduardo.
Yeah, I think it was a thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, okay. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, please contact me, and I'll pass it on to Eduardo. And thank you very much for attending today. And Eduardo, thank you very much for a very comprehensive presentation. It was great to see how we do things internally.
Thank you. And as I said before, it's hard to give it justice in an hour, but I'll be happy to dive into any of these topics and even other things. So again, thanks to everybody for joining. I appreciate the opportunity.